Alright gang, we are gaming once again, though I really want to specify that we're gaming in a very different way than we have been for past Xenoblade trailers. If you don't care about the why, just skip ahead until you no longer see the patron and member scroll and the footage changes to the actual trailer instead of just the blurred out art of Xenoblade X. Basically, I don't really think I'm a fan of the joke about how every time a new piece of news comes out, everyone's like, oh, Luxon's gonna make a 3-hour video about this, or whenever I release some sort of analysis, people will be like, oh, not long enough, or when a new trailer comes out, people in comments on my most recent video will be like, hurry up, wake up, you need to see this, where's your video, and that kind of thing. Basically, all that stuff has made me feel obligated to make as long of a video as quickly as possible every time there's a new trailer or the like. And that really came to a head with the one before this trailer, as that more or less got me completely burned out. I made a 2.5-hour video in like 36 hours, and ultimately I was falling asleep while editing the end of it. So not only was it barely edited in the first place because I got it out so quickly, but really it was not up to the standard of quality I like putting out. In order to rectify that, for this trailer, I am trying something new. Firstly, if you want the complete unfiltered ramble that was more or less as long as I could possibly talk about the trailer in one session, that is already up on my second channel and can be viewed more or less as a first draft of the videos analyzing the trailer on this channel, as that was one completely unedited, unscripted session, just going through the trailer and pointing out everything I could possibly see without any form or structure. And that includes 30 to 45 second pauses, every single and ah, reiterating the same point half a dozen times, and stopping to Google things in the middle of the video, looking up something to clarify something I was not sure about. If you want that experience, that's there, but do be warned, that video is not only going to be less effective at communicating information as these ones will be, but it will also contain less information as these are being made later with hindsight and a lot more knowledge and intent behind them. So even though these videos on this channel combined will be shorter than that one, they will be better at actually analyzing everything. As for the main channel stuff, welcome back everyone else. The TLDR is that I'm splitting the analysis into 2 separate videos. This is the general analysis and will solely focus on Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, with the only comparisons to other games being made being to the original version of Xenoblade X. The only spoilers discussed will be spoilers for the original X, and that will be limited to its own spoiler section at the end of the video. Then the second part is going to be the full spoiler discussion, which will open up purely with spoilers for the Xenoblade series and then contain a second deeper spoiler section that will also include speculation and stuff related to Xenosaga. On top of that, I have another video that is completely finished and uploaded and already has been available to supporters on Patreon and YouTube for a while now, that was originally intended to release on Sunday, but obviously this analysis and not getting in the way of that supersedes the public release of that. I will, however, be releasing that video publicly in between the 2 parts of the analysis, so when you see a video that's not part 2 to this one, rest assured that had nothing to do with the production of the second part, and you can simply view it as something to tide you over while I'm working on the second video to make it as polished as can be. That being said though, let's finally start talking about the trailer. This is more or less the exact third release of information by Nintendo I was expecting about this game. I always figured, okay, there's gonna be a launch trailer, either actual launch week or the week before, and then some other thing in between the second trailer and that, be it a trailer or a direct segment. And while it doesn't seem like there's going to be any direct in between now and the Switch 2 Direct in April, this overview trailer is effectively a direct segment outside of the context of a direct, and covers exactly what you'd expect there to be in one. Because of that, like it says in the name, a lot of this is a general overview of the game. And because I'm not particularly interested in analyzing things that are the same as they were in the Wii U game 10 years ago, there will be large sections of the trailer I'm not going to have a lot to talk about. I can only say, the game looks even prettier than it used to so many times. Also, a bit prior to the trailer, journalistic outlets were allowed to release their first previews of the game, and that contained a lot more information than just is present in this trailer. I did not make a video covering any of that stuff. I'll mention things from the previews, but I won't really directly talk about any of that stuff unless it's in this trailer. If you want more in-depth information on that, feel free to check out the original articles or content made by any other of the great Xeno creators on this platform. I'm not the only one who does stuff like this, and I encourage you to watch more than just me. Skipping over the opening scene with Elma, which we already saw part of in the last trailer, we get to the character creator, and By now we know from the previews that this is basically the same character creator the original game had, just with a lot more options added. Remember, the way this works is you choose a base design and then modify it based off of that, and we can see here for the male character, there are 14 base designs to choose from. That is the same number of base designs the original game had, but the appearances of a lot of them have been substantially changed. As one example, while the default option is more or less the same across versions, with the main difference being the ahoge being off by default in DE as opposed to on in the original, the second one boasts a completely different hairstyle and hair color. Funnily enough, the gray-haired, older-looking guy in the lower left-hand corner who really looks like Garnica Van Damme from Xenoblade 3 is actually pretty faithful to how he was in the original. It seems like they decided to keep at least one base from a given face shape the same, while changing up the other ones from that same shape in order to better highlight the increased diversity this new version of the character creator offers. I guess it's worth noting that the base face sculpts actually had their own names in the original. The first two bases were Young Boy A, then the next two were Young Boy B, then to Boy A, to Boy B, to Man A, to Man B, and the last two being Old Man, but those distinguishers have been removed from X Definitive Edition for actually kind of lore reasons that are a bit of a spoiler. Moving on to hair, we can get a very clean look at the 9 options for this specific face, and we can see a mix of old and new options, as well as 3 very familiar ones at the end. The previously spotted tie-on hairstyle doesn't appear to be an option for this face, but the last 3 visible here are still cameos. The third on the second row appears to be a mirrored version of Mikhail's hair from Xenoblade 2, and if they add the option to reverse the part on parted hairstyles, there's a good chance we'll be able to reverse this as well to directly cosplay him. The last 2 are of course based on Rein and Shulk from their appearances in Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition. Did you ever think about how 40% of people in the original Xenoblade X just made their character Shulk, when there wasn't actually a direct Shulk hairstyle in the game? That's new for DE. Moving on to the female avatar, we can see the Mithra and Nia hairstyles again. Only interesting thing here, I guess, is the fact that Mithra is an option for this face, but Pyra is not, when you think they would just both be available for the same faces. But maybe shortening Mithra's hair into Pyra's is just an option like the ahoge is for certain other hairstyles. I don't really know what to make of this. The 9 pupil options are mostly the same, but the order of them has been significantly shifted around, so that's a thing. The scroll bar on the face paint selector seems to imply that there are about 52 options, which is the same as the original game, but we could see several options that were not present in the OG, namely these blade tattoos, the blue face markings that have a vague Zohar shape to them, and the thing above it that looks a lot like certain ornate things from Xenoblade 1, so it is very possible that they just remade the entire 52 and kept some old designs while changing others to brand new ones. Also, throughout the entire character creation segment, there has been a button prompt to save or load appearance data. A lot of people have erroneously claimed that this was not present in the original game, however it was. It will just be a much more powerful option now, because presumably you will be able to save and load appearance data across your 3 save files on your one Switch profile, as opposed to just making a set of designs that you can swap between once you unlock the ability to fully customize at will. There's a little bit of the opening battle, and then an introduction to Mira as a world, and they finally decided to start showing off severe weather in Oblivia and Sylvalum at night, so that probably sold a few copies on its own. We then get an intro to overworld exploration, seeing a little bit more of the new follow ball in action, and more of the new minimap, as well as quest tracking. The only thing I'm not quite sure about when it comes to the overworld UI is the R target prompt that seems to always be hovering underneath the level tag for the nearest enemy, which is large and blocky enough where I think it would get annoying to me. And while I haven't seen anything to specifically disable that in the settings, there is a general option to disable button guides, so I believe you can get rid of that. It would just also come with the caveat of getting rid of the entire lower bar. The one button command I don't see anywhere here is R plus up on the D-pad, which was the aerial cam feature for the original game. It's not present in any of these trailers, and I don't think any previews have mentioned it, so I am kind of concerned that that mechanic has been removed as a whole, which would be really unfortunate because I liked just messing around with that. It was never super useful gameplay-wise, and using that as a way to scout around and try to find a way to get to places is nowhere near as necessary in DE now that the follow ball's pathing has been so improved. But I like just looking around at Mira, especially given that the Switch has a screenshot button. It's kind of more valuable for that thing in this game than it was in the original. And we also haven't seen any indication that Xenoblade 3's UI-less screenshot feature is also in this game, meaning you would have to go in and manually disable the entire UI to replicate that. So, I don't know, we might be looking at a slight regression in the quality of screenshots you can get from this game compared to the last ones in the series. In the data probe shot that comes after, we can see a large hexagonal region on the minimap being highlighted gold, similar to a region that could serve as a quest objective. This appears to be the new feature that allows you to highlight an individual map segment as opposed to an objective for a given quest or mission, in order to better define where the boundaries of something is. So like, if you know that a segment has a treasure to open it, you can now highlight that segment and know that any treasures outside that gold region are ones you don't need to worry about to get the map completion for it. Moving out into the full mirror map, we can clearly see the icon types for every single possible way to clear a segment. Data probes are pretty self-explanatory, but then we also have treasure, tyrant, normal mission, and now affinity mission. Moving past the long overview of NLA until we get to gameplay, we can first off see a few icons on the minimap for things that were in the original game but now have a brand new facelift, and then pieces of the NPC UI. The shop and AM terminals getting actual icons and text pointing them out is a very welcome change because it was kind of easy to forget that they were even there in the original game when you only got an A button to interact with prompt when you went out next to them. And then the way NPCs are handled is also very interesting. Fritz and Vera are in the exact same place you would expect them to be if you played the original, and the icon for an NPC that's interactable has actually changed. In the original game, it was simply just the profile icon we see here, but in DE, there's a little text bubble that's been added. I would assume that this text bubble is just X Definitive Edition's incarnation of the thing on the talk prompt for a given NPC that lets you know that character has a new dialogue. What is completely new, though, is the little prospector icon next to Vera's name. In the Wii U game, every NPC that's a member of Blade does have their division listed somewhere on the affinity chart, but here it seems like they're adding it to the overworld UI as well, if only just for neat flavor reasons. Like, there's not really any need to do this. Characters' division affiliations never really matter outside of quests those characters take part in, where usually it will be mentioned directly anyway, but this just expands the world a little bit more, and that's a cool kind of change to make too. Next, we can see the shop terminal interface, and it looks about what we expected based on some of the other shots of gearing and menuing from the previews, but this brand new outfit for Elma does stand out. It's named Super Civ Scholastics 1, and there's also 2, 3, and 4 for the same price below it in the list, and more importantly, this is Neilnail's outfit. She is outright confirmed to be a brand new party member based on other media surrounding this trailer, but this existing is another good hint, as every single recruitable character in the original game starts out equipped with an armor set named after that character, so Elma's bodywear, Lynn's legwear, etc. This gear is almost always a recolor or exact visual copy of another piece of gear somewhere else in the game, which makes sense because almost every party member is a pre-existing member of Blade, who as such would be wearing some sort of standard issue Blade gear. For example, Elma's default outfit is just an unupgradable version of the level 5 Granada Galactic Group Light outfit, and other level versions of that outfit are just recolors of the same model. The main difference here is for Elle and Celica, as they are alien characters who did not come from Earth and join Blade later, having completely unique outfits that are not only gender locked to that character's gender, but also take up all of the body slots, leaving only head open for additional customization. In the end game, you can craft additional versions of this. Elle's was the Super Civilization attire, and Celica's the Elite Super Civilization attire. Both of those outfits are level 1 gear that's more or less just for fashion gear purposes, although they do come with Treasure Sensor 20 built in. But these Super Civ Scholastics not only have 4 different versions, but the Scholastics 1 are a level 20 piece of equipment that you can just straight buy from the shop as opposed to having to craft. This not only suggests maybe we'll get the other outfits much sooner, like after actually unlocking those characters, or that Neilnail will be recruitable a bit earlier than we first expected. She only shows up in Oblivia, which does have lower level enemies in the low 20s range, so that makes sense, but she's associated with Skells, so I kind of figured that maybe you'd have to wait until you get the Skell license to meet her for the first time, though this suggests that maybe you'll be able to a little bit earlier, like Chapter 5 instead of Chapter 6. I'm not really sure what to make of 2 through 4 being here as well. They're probably going to visually be recolors of 1 for the purpose of having more unique fashion gear options, but because they're all 55k credits, That suggests to me that those are also going to be level 20 equipment and aren't upgrades to the one, so maybe they have different elemental resistances or something like that. Either way though, this is still female-locked full body gear, so we'll have limited use in terms of gameplay, but more fashion gear. That's always a good thing. Next is the battle section, and I don't really have much to say here that isn't UI related. The big R target icon becomes an R+Y/A appendage target icon when you're fighting an enemy, which again, I'm assuming you're able to turn off. We can see that the official English name of the new green meter is quick cooldown, which makes sense as what is called recast in Japanese is called cooldown in English, so that just tracks. Although it isn't actually explained anywhere in this trailer. Elma also uses Shadow Strike in this clip, and we can see something kind of interesting. We already knew that the icon for the stagger condition would be replaced with the icon used for break in every other game in the series, but we were not sure whether or not the English name would be changed. It remains as stagger here, which, yeah, okay, that does make the most sense, just so you didn't have to go back and re-record every single battle voice line. As an aside, stagger and break in Xenoblade 1 are both referred to as kuzushi, or unbalancing in the sense of martial arts, in Japanese, and because Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade X were localized by two completely different teams on two completely different continents, they chose different translated names for it that both make complete sense. Starting in Xenoblade 2 though, the Japanese name for the status was changed to the English word break written in katakana, and that was carried over for 3, though not for 1 and XDE. So basically, Japanese 1 and X are both kuzushi. English 1 is break, English X is stagger, and then for 2 and 3 across both languages, it's just called break. Most other localizations follow English and use the same term for 1, 2, and 3, but a different one for X, except for German, which is just Schwanken in all of them. I don't have anything to say until we get to the overdrive section. I'm not going to try making sense of the amount of segments on the quick cooldown meter anymore, just because we now know that at least some of the upgrades to it come from Mira Survey, and it fluctuates more or less at complete random throughout every clip we see it in the trailer, and randomly appears and vanishes in different Skell clips with no rhyme or reason. This segment doesn't tell us much other than being further indication that the base duration of overdrive has been increased from 15 to 25 seconds, which is just a nice smoothing thing and allows people who may have been very confused with how it worked in the original game a bit more time to get their footing and learn how it works. Probably a good change altogether, even though it does make the game easier. What I would like to talk about though is an addendum to stuff I said in my previous video. The first thing I said is that the multicolor icons on the overdrive guide on the right side of the screen do not show all 5 colors your arts can be. That's wrong. If you zoom in, you can very clearly see all 5 art colors are present on that icon. The other thing I got bent out of shape over was the idea that they just used the generic rainbow icon for any instance of 2 or more colors and didn't make specific icons for that, and it never occurred to me that they could have just simplified the overdrive combos themselves to make it a little more easy to get into as well, and that purple into anything will give you the appendage damage up instead of just purple into yellow or orange, and so forth. That not only completely makes sense, but I think is just another piece of simplification us players of the original game will have to accept in order for this definitive edition to be as beginner-friendly and marketable as they seem to want it to be. Next is the basic explanation of Skells, and because they do show them flying, I would like to start talking about this here, and that is the music. There's a bit of at least one new track later in the trailer, but we also have confirmation on Twitter from both the official Japanese Xenoblade account and the man himself that Hiroyuki Sawano, composer of the original Xenoblade X's soundtrack, will be contributing new music to the new story. It also mentioned that composer Misaki Umase, who is new to the Xenoblade series and as far as I can tell video games as a whole, but has worked with Sawano before, will also be contributing. The Xenoblade account's tweet says that the new story will feature music by Sawano and Umase, but the tweet from the actual Sawano account says that he and Umase are in charge of the music for XDE, so while my initial gut reading of this was that they would only be doing a couple songs, say Sawano would do the ending theme and maybe 1 or 2 more, Umase would do a few trying to mimic Sawano's style, and then the rest would be handled by the composers of the rest of the Xenoblade games, I'm now starting to lean more towards believing that most of the new music will be done by these two composers, and even if that's not the case, I'm extremely excited to have the original composer back in Sawano, and also excited to see what Umase brings to the table in her first outing in the series. I'm talking about music now because, while they haven't posted full versions of any of the new songs we've heard yet, We do have a new arrangement of an old song. Official Nintendo accounts have posted a 2-minute snippet of Don't Worry 2XDV, a new arrangement of Don't Worry, which was the Skell flight theme from the original game, courtesy of Hiroyuki Sawano. We also know from the previews that there is actually an option in the settings to change what Skell flight theme you hear. The original Don't Worry, 2XDV, or an alternative version of 2XDV without the vocals. Don't get your hopes up and think that a lot of the original soundtrack has been rearranged like with Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition, as there's no toggle for that in the settings, only specifically the Skell flight music. Also, don't get your hopes up for the ability to remove the Skell flight music, because the toggle is only between those 3 versions of Don't Worry. There's no option to turn the music off entirely and just leave the area music, and there's no option to turn Wir Fliegen off when you are in overdrive. You would think they would have learned after everyone complaining about the chain attack theme in Xenoblade 3, but overdrive is optimal and possibly even more powerful than it was in the original game, so you better get used to hearing Wir Fliegen a lot and not any of the battle themes ever after a certain point in the story. I'm really hoping a patch for this happens at some point down the line, because it seems like a relatively easy thing to do, and, well, who knows, maybe it's already in the day 1 patch, and the people with review copies just haven't gotten that yet because they don't even have access to the online functions of the game either. The possibility of things getting patched in later, and the fact that no one has the day 1 patch yet, is the only reason I haven't been complaining loudly about the seeming lack of an event theater in XDE, which is a feature every other Switch Xenoblade game has had. If Xenoblade 2 didn't have New Game Plus until 4 months after it first released, there's a kind of decent chance that Event Theater is not unlocked until whatever the day 1 patch of this game is. Now, is XDE going to have New Game Plus? No. X is also the only Xenoblade game in the series to have a proper post-game, so it doesn't really need one either. This Skell segment also shows without a doubt that the Hresvelg is a player-usable Skell as it appears in the hangar, and then we also get a very quick clip of it being used in battle. Based on the soul voice, we can tell that the other character in the party here is Elma, and her and the player are both in this same Skell frame. This is not a huge deal, it was just a potential idea that maybe we'd only have access to one copy of the frame at a time based on how it was described in earlier material from the last trailer. Another thing to note is that while the characters are level 50 and 51, the actual name of the Skell frame starts with GD0930. And if this follows the naming scheme of other Skell frames, that means that this is a level 30 frame, so you are able to unlock the Hresvelg at around level 30. I'm not sure anyone was expecting to get it that early, because that's the same level as the first set of upgrades to your default Skell you can get. You get a unique level 20 Skell frame for free when you get the license, and then the lowest level frames you can get from a shop is 30, and this seems to be the same level as that, which is interesting because, well, the 8 arts equipped right now are 8 brand new ones, and the avatar even has a new line directly calling out the name of the Hunter's Blow art used in this clip. So not only does this confirm that there are going to be new lines for the avatar, but also the only other Skell arts that have callouts where they're mentioned by name are the Ares arts. And since these 8 arts are all new, I think we can pretty reasonably guess that the Hresvelg is going to work like a lower leveled Ares frame. Basically, I'm guessing this Hresvelg is going to be a pre-built, craftable Skell frame that is going to be better than you could immediately make from any of the default level 30 frames, but not as good as a fully optimized build. Which is neat because it's just another safety net for players who might have gotten overwhelmed or confused by all of the layers of systems and amount of customization in the original game. It will make things a bit easier and allow you to get through the story a bit more smoothly, but it's not good enough to fully do everything in the game even for that level range. And I think that's a good thing to have, since due to the online, they can't really add a proper casual mode to X like they did for Xenoblade 1 DE, although I would be very surprised if the option to lower the level of a boss after dying to it a few times did not make it into this version as well. The 2 Ares frames are a weaker and stronger version of the exact same build that are locked behind level 60 and completing the main story of the base game, so I'm guessing that there will be a level 30 and a level 50 Hresvelg frame, matching the level 30 and level 50 tier shop Skells. Not much else to say about this, other than there are 8 arts for the Hrisvelg. Maybe they added an additional 4 arts to the Ares, because it would be kind of weird if the special, powerful, pre-built Skells for level 30 and 50 had 8, and then once you hit level 60, that and the stronger version of that are only 4. And that Hunter's Blow, the art being used here, inflicts topple, which is not a thing Skell arts really did in the original game. There was a lot of stagger, but because Skells can bind an enemy out of stagger, and that can last much longer than topple, while also basically allowing all of your other party members to dogpile the enemy, topple wasn't really as necessary in Skell builds, so it's interesting seeing this here, maybe to benefit when it's your only Skell in the party, and binding would actually be a DPS loss. The next clip just demonstrates Skell super weapons for people who didn't know those existed. Honestly, as someone who's played the game already, seeing a level 50 Skell frame take out half the HP of a level 30 Tyrant isn't super impressive, but we do see a little bit more about the UI, as this is our first indication of low fuel in a Skell in DE so far. The Maxima frame the player's piloting here has 18,000 max fuel in the original version of the game, and we can see it's a little over 5,100 here, with the icons both on the right side with the full numerical bar and the smaller one on the party list turning yellow and the gas can displaying a noticeably lower level. Now, it's good that they do actually do this, but I'm worried that it's not granular enough for other party members. You have the option to always display the numerical fuel meter of your own Skell, but it seems here like the icon changes to yellow under maybe 50%, and then probably has a red under 25% or something, which is okay at a glance, but the original game did have complete discrete bars emptying for every single party member, and I hope that's at least an option somewhere. We then get a bit of side quest explanation and see a little bit more of the UI, and then Neilnail shows up. And this footage is very clearly from a Neilnail affinity mission, as she's just there in the Blade Barracks, and then also standing around the briefing table with Elma, and probably more importantly, Celica. Elma being here doesn't indicate that this is part of the main story, or she's required for this affinity mission, as your other non-required party members will just stand around in the background in affinity mission cutscenes and not say or do anything. That could also be the case for Celica here, but again, her and Neilnail are both Clurians, and they're the only examples of that race in the entire game, so it would be very weird if they never have any direct interactions. Her voice is audible for one line in this cutscene, and we can hear that she does have some sort of British accent, which Celica did in the original game, so they're just making that a trend for Clurian characters. Celica's English VA is an American putting on the accent. Who knows what they're going to do with Neilnail? These characters being British is not indicative of any sort of connections to the other Xenoblade games. Celica has been British for 10 years already, and that never meant anything. What does kind of mean something is confirmation that Neilnail's name is written this way in English, which is not what I expected it to be based on the Japanese, but it doesn't really matter anyway at all. It's still going to be pronounced the same way in English regardless of how it's written, and this should just be proof to you that even though I have been weirdly correct on a lot of things before, I am not always correct every single time, and I like being wrong, because that means the series can still surprise me. Obviously, this is just the spelling of one character's name, but take this as a small sign of things that also exist on a larger scale. Why am I so confident Neilnail is playable, though? Well, if you go to the official Japanese website for the game, and go to the Blade tab, it lists off every single party member from the original game. The vast majority of them are in this little grid section, and after this trailer dropped, 2 new characters were added to the grid. Neilnail and another character we'll see later. Every single other character in this section is playable in the original game, so this more or less confirms that both of these characters will be in DE. Additionally, actually clicking on Neilnail will show this new screenshot, which very clearly depicts her with a pair of psycho launchers on her back, and off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure the only characters who use that as a weapon in the original game are playable, so that's just a little bit more proof. All of the information in Japanese here in Neilnail's bio did make it into the English language official Nintendo tweet on her, so I'm just going to read that instead. Humans really are resilient. I have a lot to learn from you. Neilnail is an archaeologist studying alien civilizations. She is friendly, scholarly, and curious. She is very intrigued by the culture and customs of the people of Earth. This is a type of character that doesn't really show up in the original game. There are a lot of humans that are trying to learn about and understand the various alien species present, but none of the aliens are really trying to understand humans outside the context of how they exist now together on Mira. Neilnail is a proper archaeologist who seems to be wanting to learn and preserve as much of overall Earth culture as possible now that the planet is gone and the old civilization can be effectively considered extinct. I think it's neat that nothing about her here mentions Skells at all, because we only knew she existed in the original game because of Skells that bore her name, and those same Skells show up again with her in DE, but they're not mentioned at all verbally, so it seems like even though she does appear to be an optional recruitable character, she will have a lot of depth to her. This also provides a lot more depth to the Clurians as a whole, as Celica seems to just have been from some farming village out in a rural area, but Neilnail is a scholarly, educated person who's doing professional research on humanity. It's neat that they went out of their way to not Planet of Hats the Clurian civilization, which honestly, like, even the Nopon and the Prone do kind of fall into in X. Also, while I am interested in seeing her interact with Celica and have their two different opinions on what happened to the Clurian civilization and all that stuff, I'm actually more excited about the possibility of her interacting with Elle, because we got Neilnail, the professional archaeologist doing like actual proper well thought out research on humanity, and then Mr. Space Goat, who lived in the woods somewhere on his own and happened to have the actual Library of Congress crash on top of him, which he started learning English from. All of the English dialogue from Neilnail we've seen so far indicates that she's relatively professional and proper, and then the person on Mira doing the closest thing to what she does is the guy who's most famous for saying the word ass caves. It would be peak comedy, and also I want to hear Ray Chase do that voice more, so please give Elle a lot more dialogue in DE. Only other thing about this scene doesn't really have to do with Neilnail. The font used for the subtitles in this game, which has been seen elsewhere in previews, is virtually identical to the font used in Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition, and I'm honestly not a fan of that. First off, every Xenoblade game up until now has used a different font for the subtitles, and second off, this font worked perfectly for the steampunk fantasy trappings of the original Xenoblade, but does not really work for a near-future sci-fi. I would prefer if they riffed on the font used in the original subtitles and just made it larger and more clear, like they did with almost all the actual UI elements in the game. Skipping HB, we then see the online menu for the first time, and this has been significantly improved. In addition to everything being larger and clearer to read, like is the case with basically everything in the UI in this game, there's a brand new private squad option, which is not something you could do in the original game. You could join friends, but you would just be joining the same public lobby as them, and couldn't ensure that only people you wanted to be there would be, but now this is an option, so your friend group can go and do squad tasks at whatever pace they want, or say, I don't know, someone streaming the game could give out the code and only viewers would be able to join their lobby and participate in stuff with them. Very, very good change. A change that I believe is also very good, but will be controversial among some players, is the indication that there are limited attempts at the two global nemesis. It is very unfortunate to see that Telethia Plume and Igrolith Zero are the only nemesis available right now, but again, previewers have not even had access to the online at all. They might add more when the game comes out or post-launch, so I'm not super concerned about there being a lot of repetitive content just because of that. Without explaining too much in detail for people who don't know, the global nemesis basically are worldwide raid bosses that have a certain amount of HP and will linger around being able to be challenged by anyone until that HP runs out, and every time you fight the nemesis, you get rewards based on how much HP you take out before you lose or run out of time for that attempt. In the original game, it cost a grindable resource in order to challenge the nemesis each time, but very optimized builds could take out huge chunks of its HP in one go, and also optimized players would be better at grinding up the resource needed to challenge again, so it was very possible for a nemesis to go down quickly before more casual players would even have a chance to attempt it. In this case, it seems like we're limited to 10 attempts per nemesis per uptime period, which is more than enough for the people with heavily optimized builds to take out thousands of RP and get all their big rewards, but players who aren't capable of doing that will first off seemingly not have as big a barrier to entry to challenge in the first place, but also actually get their chance to take out their own RP and get their own rewards, which might allow them to advance their builds to get closer to those other players. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of top players from the original game getting very salty. They can't just infinitely grind these and ruin the experience for more casual players, but this is a good change. All of the online missions listed here are in the original game. I don't want to take this as confirmation they haven't added any new online content. I am guessing there will be more, but it either won't be added until a couple months after the game releases as some sort of free update, or will be story locked beyond completing the new story so that there is a lot more endgame content for people who have been powered up with all the new gear to use. Whoa, is that a Gnosticism reference in my Xeno game? Whoa, is that an Undead Unluck reference in my Xeno game? I have absolutely nothing to say about the big montage of story scenes presented identically to how they were in the original game until we get to this new pink-haired character. And hey, look, that is the other new character added to the playable party member section on the Japanese website, so this too is a new playable character. Based on outfit and quotes, this is the mystery pilot of the Hresvelg who was wearing a mask in the other trailer. According to Nintendo, Leisel is a test pilot and former fighter pilot belonging to Arms Company, who is involved in planning the development of the new Skell Hresvelg. The Japanese site does contain slightly more information than the official English posts did, confirming that Leisel was specifically in the German Air Force, and has an additional line that I'm guessing was cut from the English tweets for character limitation concerns that says that Leisel has a somewhat rugged personality but a very caring side towards friends. Also, the name Arms Company was not a weird translation thing. Even the Japanese just says Arms Company in English, so this is some sort of new faction that exists now in DE. But yeah, we've got a new character with a very German name in a Xeno game who has also been confirmed to actually have been German before Earth stopped having a Germany on it. Which, given the track record of characters with very conspicuously German-sounding names in the series so far, big things might be happening in this game that did not happen in the original X. Specifying which country Leisel came from is interesting though, because this is, as far as I can tell, the first time any character is confirmed to have come from somewhere other than the US prior to the formation of the coalition government. Like, from his name and appearance, Kentaro Nagi is clearly intended to have Japanese ancestry, but there's no indication anywhere in the game if he is a Japanese-American man who is a member of the US military before it got folded into the coalition, or if he was a member of the Japanese military who got assigned to the US after both the Japanese and US militaries were folded into the coalition, if that makes sense. Specifically, Germany here is kind of interesting because in the planning stage, NLA was originally supposed to be a new Tokyo, and there was going to be a bigger Japanese theme to humanity's presence as a whole, and in the final version of X itself, there are hints of the White Whale receiving French language transitions, possibly even after landing on Mira. So adding potential stuff from another country into the mix is very interesting and might have implications for future story. I don't really have much else to say about Leisel. As you might be able to hear, we haven't even had an official pronoun used in English yet, but let's just step back and take a minute here. If you look at the Hresvelg, the only art from it we've seen is Hunter's Blow, an ability which involves this experimental new Skell transforming into its completely unique jet plane mode and ramming the enemy in such a way that causes gravity damage and topple, as if the enemy itself is being pulled down by gravity and locked in the topple position, something that no other Skell in the game can really do. And then its pilot is Leisel, a feminine-looking, self-confident test pilot with light reddish hair and a completely unique pilot suit. I was joking when I called the Hresvelg the Zeta Ares last time, but no, they put actual Ruluka in the game too, so I think that is exactly what they were going for. I genuinely don't understand how my timing to become the one Xeno content creator to actually watch Gundam and understand the references the series makes to it is. Like, I finished Double Zeta less than a month ago, and that was just in time to be able to recognize that they put Ruluka in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. Can you please replace Goedio with Haman Karn next time, though? Anyway, while we don't know when all of the new party members come in, Neil and Leisel were both shown off in the section of the trailer before they start showcasing the new story epilogue, which heavily suggests to me that these two will be recruitable characters at some point during the main story, so I don't think their inclusion is even considered a spoiler at all. But what we are about to do is get into the last bit of the trailer that touches on the new story content, which will require spoiling the original Xenoblade X. So if Definitive Edition is going to be your first time experiencing this game, please leave and experience it all for yourself the first time. Weirdly, the first shot, where the narrator is directly saying brand new story, is not taken from the epilogue, because there's still a percentage on Blade Tower, and it doesn't look the way it does after you discover the Lifehold and finish the main game. We then learn that the inciting incident for this new story is this disappearance phenomenon, where voids are showing up and seeming to swallow parts of Mira. According to this map, there's going to be one void associated with each of the 5 main continents, with the one right in between Primordia and Oblivia seeming to correspond to the ghost attack that Elma and Lyn are seen facing off with in the last trailer, as well as scenes in this one, and we then get to directly see the one to the west of Noctilum go into effect as it swallows up terrain, flora, and fauna alike. I am guessing that these voids are going to show up, swallow some things, ghosts are going to come out of them, we are going to stop the ghosts, and then the voids are going to retreat a little bit, so they only have the extents that we actually see on the map in NLA when we head off to the new area to try and solve whatever the actual problem is, purely for the sake of not covering any gameplay areas and locking us out of treasures, enemies, or whatever that would be covered by those voids. We can see the Noxalum Void actually covering terrain and swallowing up specific enemies. Like, that is Fernando right there getting sucked up. But on the map, we can see it only covers a little bit of the mountain wall to the west of all that stuff. So I'm guessing they grow and shrink, and they're just going to be there on the overworld as a reminder of what we're going to have to deal with if things keep getting worse. If that's not the case, then probably areas will get swallowed up for a time, and the voids will disappear entirely once we finish the new story and everything goes back to normal. One of the voice lines that plays is, "Let it all out, we've earned a big tearful reunion," and appears to be the same voice actor who I can't identify, who said the "humanity still needs me" line from the last trailer, and that combined with everything else from this trailer confirms that the Black Knight is just Elma's old partner, so yeah, this is exactly the most simple explanation for everything. The shot extends a couple frames more than it did in the last trailer, allowing us to see a little bit of the guy's actual head. People thought the shot in the last trailer might have been Lau because their outfits are almost identical, but that shot did last long enough where we saw high up enough on his back where Lau's hair would have been visible if this were him, but now we can actually see what this guy's hair looks like. It is much shorter and a grayish silver that is very, very close to Elma's. And on top of that, from what we can see of his ears, it seems like the speculation that he had gray or silver skin based on the last trailer was wrong, and that was just a trick of the lighting. He seems to have just pretty normal, natural human-colored skin. It is hard to tell because we can barely see his ears and, again, the lighting, but there is a strong possibility that he has a similar skin color to Elma, which, when combined with the hair color being very close as well, might suggest that the theory that he is another member of Elma's race and went to Earth with her is actually true. This theory is contradicted by statements from the original game, namely that Elma came alone and was the only xenoform and the only life form actually physically preserved on the White Whale and not just shoved in the Lifehold computers. This would be a fairly big change to the base game's story, but this is something that's feasible to do without too much issue, as the only characters who have speaking lines in those scenes that would have the contradictions are also characters we've already seen in the epilogue so far, and as such, already need new voice lines. He seems to have a special connection to the Ares, and since the Ares is alien technology, him not being human and the connection coming from that would make sense. That and special alien powers being how he got to Mira after ejecting from the White Whale long before it crashed would also make sense. Remember, Mira is implied to be some sort of sealed space. It's impossible to escape from so far, and it seems impossible to get to or detect either unless Mira wants you there or something like that. So if he has some sort of alien superpower, maybe that could explain how he's even here in the first place. Although the ghosts are here too and they didn't crash, plus there's a clip on the Japanese website showing one of the voids forming and then the ghosts immediately pouring out of it, so it's possible that he just normally survived the encounter, somehow was able to repair the Ares, and then followed the ghosts here. Also, later on in the same clip, we can see a shot of a ghost letting off some sort of energy and seemingly turning members of Blade into salt. This is a reference to the Bible, but it's special not because it is a reference to the Bible in a Xeno game, but because it is a biblical reference that originates from Xenosaga. Ghosts are behaving more like the Gnosis from Saga than I expected they'd make them do, and we will talk much more about this in the spoiler video. What we'll also talk about there is the seeming Ouroboros from Xenoblade 3 looking cores on the Ares and on the ghosts. If you look at them closely, especially in some of the new shots from this trailer, you can see that they are very similar but not identical to Ouroboros and Mobius cores from that game, so that might have implications. But also, as part of their preview, the outlet Shack News uploaded much of the opening cutscene of the game. And if you look very closely at that, you can see that the new designs for the Ares and Ghosts are not present there. They look exactly like they did in the original game, that is, not having those cores. So this isn't some sort of universal design update to those character models, it's one exclusive to this epilogue story. So I'm wondering if those cores are going to have something to do with how the ghosts and Ares got to Mira in the first place, or will have any sort of other plot significance, regardless of whether or not they ever end up meaning the same thing or have anything to do with connections to Ouroboros and Xenoblade 3. Elma even directly refers to the ghosts as the ghosts here, which is the first time they're referred to by name outside of the lyrics of Black Tar, which is kind of funny, but does also confirm that that part of the lore hasn't been changed and this faction is still called the Ghosts. Doubt that's going to matter, but it's also there. She mentions that the disappearance of Mira, the ghosts, and the Ares are all connected to something, and in the last trailer has a line saying that that Skell, presumably the Ares, was possibly leading humanity somewhere. So it seems like there is going to be something special about the Ares that has to do with the new area and probably the secrets of Mira. Our first actual shot of the new area is of this giant spear that's way bigger than something that could be wielded by any of the Skells in the original game, uprooting itself from the ground and flying towards the big structure in the center of the new area, which I've been referring to as the Rose Garden because of its similarities to a space-based floating object with the same name from concept art. You can't really glean much just based on this sphere. People have said it vaguely resembles high Entia technology or flame clocks from Xenoblade 3, but I think at most the shot of it flying towards a floating island is a visual callback to a scene from Xenoblade 1 where a spear gets chucked at a floating island that doesn't go any deeper than just the visuals. I have no idea what this means, but if there's really big weapons, and there are ruins that suggest giants used to live around Mira, maybe we're going to see really big giant guys or giant Skells that are much, much bigger than pre-existing Skells to fight, and that would be cool. With the next shot of the new area, I will point out something else I was wrong about. The Japanese website confirms that these are floating islands that appeared in the sky above Mira, so there's no Oblivia Chasm theories here, but we do also know that the Manon ship will be what takes us here, so that's still true. In this shot, we can see some plants, but all the enemies here appear to be mechanical. There are a lot of robot enemies that were canonically made by the ancient civilization of Mira and then reprogrammed by the Ganglion to attack people, but there is also a regular Ganglion Skell hanging up in the air too, and all the metal on these things has the same weird shiny rust effect on it. The Japanese site's little blurb on the new story machine translates to, "Vanishing phenomenon, ghosts, and the remnants of Ganglion. A floating continent appears in the sky above Mira along with this new threat. Blade once again heads to an unknown continent to protect humanity from hardship." So yes, in addition to whatever new threats are found here, we're going to be tangling with remnants of the Ganglion after Luxar's defeat in addition to the ghosts. So that is a kind of cool piece of new information, and it does make sense because there was a whole huge Ganglion mothership that never really gets destroyed. And even though we decimated their forces, they probably didn't fully commit to the battle over the Lifehold, so there's going to be some sort of power struggle or internal Ganglion politics or that kind of thing, and there's going to be some new leader still trying to take the fight to humanity. There's also a cool new render of the Ares, and that comes with the text, "Just when the main characters are on the verge of death, a Skell suddenly descends from the sky. It was the Ares which defeated the attacking enemy and protected everyone just before the White Whale's arrival on Mira. Thought to be missing along with the pilot, he decides to join his team once again to face a new threat." So yes, this outright confirms that the Ares pilot is Elma's old partner, and he will presumably be another one of the brand new party members to this game once he joins the team. Besides showing the one unmasking shot twice, he hasn't been seen outside the Skell, but it's very easy to just not put him in the party for gameplay shots, and only use cutscene shots that he's not in. From the previews, we know there will be at least 4 new party members, and this already covers 3. Will the amount of party member slots expand when we reach the epilogue and there will be more characters added to the base game? I don't know, but what I do know is that there is at least 1 new party member we have not seen at all yet. It could be a pre-existing character like Gajarg being elevated to playability, but until we play the game and see an affinity mission for him, who really knows what that's about? The 4 new slots we've seen so far might actually be 5 in the event Lao does not rejoin the party in the epilogue, but given that we see him talking to the Black Knight, and the Black Knight almost certainly becomes playable here, it would be really weird if he doesn't eventually return. I can very easily see him want to punish himself or not want to face the members of Blade again after what he did, so I'm not sure he'll be around as part of the main story of the epilogue, but it's almost certain that he's going to come around eventually and join the party, at least in the post game. This also means a very funny niche feature from the original game might not come back in Definitive Edition. If after Chapter 12 you spoke to Doug in NLA, he would give you everything Lau had equipped when he left the party, because there was no other way to get that stuff back. But with the possibility of Lau outright rejoining in DE, and the fact that you don't need to physically hold onto the equipment he was wearing anymore for fashion gear, he might just not do that and Lau will rejoin with what he left with. I don't have much to say about the exploration shots of the new area. It's kind of hard to see what it's all about without a much bigger continuous shot and overview of it. It's still very exciting to have an area that's designed to have the flight module from the ground up, because it did completely trivialize exploration in the original game, so that's going to be cool. And in this one shot, there's a beacon in the background, and I'm not quite sure what this is. I'm guessing that for lore purposes, i.e. these are floating islands that you can't dig very far down into, data probes will not exist in this new region like in the rest of Mira. However, that big thing in the background looks like a beacon, so it's possible that setting these up or reactivating some ancient technology is going to be the equivalent for setting a data probe in this area. It vaguely looks like Hyantia technology from Xenoblade 1, I guess, and does let off a different color light than the weird energy field that's being projected by the Rose Garden, but I kind of doubt just this random thing in the background that's probably for fast travel purposes is going to have to do with any sort of connection to the other Xenoblade games. Until next video, though, where I talk about that stuff, including spoilers for the rest of Xeno, this is Luxon, signing off.